The alien's curiosity. The rhythmic hum of the spacecraft reverberated through the corridors, a constant reminder of its life-sustaining power as it drifted silently through the void of space. Leah sat in the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the human male working diligently at one of the consoles below. Her translucent, shimmering hair cascaded down her shoulders, catching the dim light and reflecting it like liquid starlight. Her luminescent skin, soft and almost otherworldly, seemed to pulse faintly as her thoughts raced. Humans were peculiar creatures. Fragile in form yet possessing an inexplicable vitality that both intrigued and confounded Leah. Their species had achieved so much despite their limitations, exploring the stars, forging alliances, and thriving in environments far harsher than their homeworld. Yet what fascinated Leah most about humans was their peculiar way of bonding. The whispered tales of how they reproduced, intimately, with emotion and touch, were almost mythical to her kind, who relied on clinical precision and sterile technology to perpetuate their species. Ethan, the human she watched from above, moved with an easy confidence that captivated her. His dark hair fell messily over his forehead, and his strong hands moved deftly over the console's controls. He radiated warmth, something Leah could almost feel even at this distance. She tilted her head, her large, glowing eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to make sense of the strange emotion stirring within her. Was it mere curiosity? Or something more? A sudden voice startled her from her thoughts. "Leah," Ethan called, his tone light but curious. "You've been staring for a while. Everything okay up there?" Leah blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Her species prided themselves on their composure, but she found herself fumbling for a response. "I was observing," she said finally, her voice lilting and musical. She descended from the observation deck with measured grace, her movements almost liquid as she approached him. Ethan leaned against the console, folding his arms with an amused smile. "Observing me? Should I be flattered or concerned?" She ignored the teasing tone in his voice and asked directly, "Your species, the way you bond with one another. It is unusual." Ethan's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "You mean relationships? Or, wait, you mean reproduction?" A chuckle escaped him, rich and genuine. "You've got questions about that, huh?" "I find the concept improbable," Leah admitted. "The intertwining of bodies, the exchange of genetic material in such a physical manner, it defies logic. My kind does not engage in such inefficiencies." Ethan laughed, the sound warm and inviting. "Well, I can see how it might seem that way to someone who's never experienced it. But it's not just about reproduction for us. It's about connection, trust, emotion, feeling close to someone in every way." Leah's head tilted again, her glowing eyes studying him intently. "Connection," she repeated softly. "Emotion. These are abstract. My kind does not require them to function as a society." "Maybe not," Ethan said, his smile softening, "but do you ever wonder what you're missing?" The question lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Leah's chest tightened, though she did not understand why. Her mind raced through her logical reasoning, but it was no match for the strange heat blooming within her. Humans had always been a curiosity, but now she felt a pull toward this particular one, a pull she could neither explain nor deny. "I do not understand," Leah said finally, her voice quieter now. "How can such inefficiencies create anything meaningful?" Ethan's gaze softened as he straightened, stepping closer to her but still keeping a respectful distance. "It's not about efficiency, Leah. It's about feeling alive. Being close to someone else, trusting them enough to let them see every part of you, it's something that can't be measured or explained. You'd have to experience it to really understand." Leah's pulse quickened, and her translucent skin flushed faintly with bioluminescent light. "Experience it?" she echoed, unsure if she wanted to know what that entailed. Ethan smiled again, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. "Not something you can learn from observation, I'm afraid. But if you ever want to know more, I'm here." With that, he turned back to his console, leaving Leah to process his words. She stood there for a long moment, her mind a whirlwind of curiosity and confusion. For the first time in her life, she felt something beyond the cold logic her species revered, a yearning to understand, to feel what this human described. As she returned to her quarters that night, the rhythmic hum of the ship seemed different, almost alive with possibility. For Leah, this was no longer a mere academic study. It was the beginning of a journey into the unknown, a journey that could challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her kind, and the strange, fascinating creatures called humans. Breaking the ice. Leah's quarters were a sanctuary of sterile efficiency, reflecting the values of her species. Everything had a purpose, a function, and no space was wasted on aesthetics. Yet tonight, the pristine room felt stifling. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, "It's not about efficiency. It's about feeling alive." She sat on the edge of her sleek, metallic bed, her shimmering hair draped over her shoulders like a curtain of starlight. Her fingers traced idle patterns on her thigh, the motion uncharacteristically restless. The data she had collected on humans was thorough: physiological studies, cultural histories, behavioral analyses. But none of it had prepared her for the complexity of emotions she was now experiencing. The desire to understand burned within her. It was more than curiosity now, it was a need. She resolved to confront Ethan again, to ask the questions her logical mind had suppressed for too long. The following day, Leah found Ethan in the ship's communal lounge. He was seated at a table, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands, the earthy aroma wafting through the air. A faint smile played on his lips as he watched a holographic display of Earth's lush forests, a sharp contrast to the cold sterility of the alien ship. Leah hesitated for a moment before approaching, her footsteps light and deliberate. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft yet carrying an undeniable urgency. He looked up, his expression brightening at the sight of her. "Leah. Morning. What's on your mind?" "I wish to speak with you, privately," she said, her glowing eyes flicking briefly to the few other crew members in the lounge. Ethan raised an eyebrow but nodded, setting his coffee aside. "Sure. Lead the way." Leah guided him to a quieter section of the ship, where the low hum of the engines was the only sound. She stopped in a small observation alcove, the stars outside casting a silvery glow over them. Turning to face him, she clasped her hands together, a gesture of unease she rarely displayed. "I require clarification," she began, her voice faltering slightly. "About what you said yesterday. About connection." Ethan leaned casually against the wall, his expression open and patient. "Okay. What do you want to know?" Leah hesitated, searching for the right words. "You said that humans bond not just for reproduction, but for emotional closeness. Explain this. Why do you place such importance on it?" Ethan's brow furrowed slightly as he considered her question. "It's hard to explain because it's something you feel, not something you analyze. For humans, connecting with someone, whether it's a friend, a partner, or even family, is like sharing a part of yourself. It's about trust, understanding, and knowing that someone cares for you as much as you care for them." Leah tilted her head, her bioluminescent skin flickering faintly. "But why would such vulnerability be desirable? Does it not expose you to harm?" "It does," Ethan admitted, his gaze meeting hers. "But it also opens you to something beautiful. Imagine sharing your happiest moments with someone who understands them completely, or having someone stand by you during your hardest times. It's worth the risk." Leah absorbed his words in silence, her mind grappling with concepts that defied her species' logic. "You said yesterday that I would have to experience it to understand. How would one begin such an experience?" Ethan chuckled softly, the sound warm and reassuring. "Well, it starts with trust. You have to let yourself be vulnerable, even if it's scary. It's about opening up, sharing thoughts, feelings, and, sometimes, physical closeness. Her glowing eyes narrowed slightly. Physical closeness. Is this an essential component? Not always, Ethan said, his tone thoughtful. But it helps. Touch can be comforting, grounding. It's a way of saying, I'm here for you. For humans, it's a natural part of building bonds. Leah hesitated, her hands fidgeting, a rare display of uncertainty. Would you demonstrate? Ethan straightened, his smile fading into an expression of surprise. Demonstrate? Yes, Leah said firmly, though her voice carried an undertone of vulnerability. I wish to understand. I wish to feel what humans feel. Ethan hesitated, his gaze searching hers. Leah, this isn't something to take lightly. It's personal, and it's meaningful. Are you sure you're ready for that? Her pulse quickened, her bioluminescent skin flickering brighter. I am unsure. But I cannot continue to study humans without fully comprehending this aspect of your species. He stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Okay. Let's start small. Hold out your hand. Leah extended her hand, her delicate fingers trembling slightly. Ethan reached out and placed his hand over hers, his warmth spreading across her skin. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever known, soft, comforting, and inexplicably grounding. A strange heat bloomed in her chest, her pulse quickening in response. See? Ethan said gently. This is connection. It's not just about touch, it's about what it means. Trusting someone enough to let them in. Leah stared at their hands, her glowing eyes wide with wonder. I feel something. It is unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Ethan smiled. That's a start. It's like learning a new language, you'll get better at it with time. For the first time in her life, Leah felt as though she were standing on the edge of something extraordinary. The logical framework that had guided her existence now seemed inadequate to describe the sensations coursing through her. She didn't fully understand what she was feeling, but for once, she didn't need to. It was enough to simply experience. The first touch. The days following Leah's first lesson with Ethan were a whirlwind of emotions and self-reflection. For someone who had always relied on logic and data to make sense of the world, her newfound feelings were as exhilarating as they were disorienting. Every time she replayed the moment Ethan's hand touched hers, a strange warmth spread through her, defying all her training and understanding. Leah found herself seeking Ethan out more frequently, drawn to his easy smile, his calming presence, and the way he seemed to navigate the complexities of human emotion with such confidence. To her surprise, he was always patient with her questions, even when they delved into subjects that made her cheeks flush with faint bioluminescent light. One evening, as the ship glided through the endless darkness of space, Leah found herself standing outside Ethan's quarters. Her hands hovered hesitantly over the door panel, her heart fluttering in a way she didn't fully understand. Before she could second-guess herself, she pressed the button, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Ethan looked up from his small worktable, where he had been tinkering with a handheld device. His face lit up with a welcoming smile. Leah. What brings you here? She stepped inside, her movements deliberate yet hesitant. I wish to continue our lessons, she said, her voice soft but resolute. Ethan raised an eyebrow, setting the device aside. Lessons in connection? She nodded, her glowing eyes meeting his. I have been thinking about what you said, that touch and trust are foundational to human bonding. I wish to understand it more deeply. Ethan gestured toward the couch along the wall. All right. Let's start simple again. Come sit. Leah moved to the couch and sat beside him, her posture rigid with uncertainty. Ethan leaned back, his demeanor relaxed as he spoke. The key to connection is comfort. You need to feel safe with the person you're with, like they won't hurt you or judge you. Leah tilted her head slightly. I do feel safe with you, Ethan. Her candid statement seemed to catch him off guard, but he smiled softly. That's good. Then let's build on that. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers. May I? She hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Yes. His hand closed gently around hers, and Leah felt the same surge of warmth she had experienced before. But this time, it wasn't just her hand that reacted, it was her entire being. Her heart raced, and her skin glowed faintly, a visual representation of the emotions coursing through her. Notice how touch can say a lot without words, Ethan said quietly. It can comfort, reassure, or even communicate emotions. Leah studied their joined hands, her fingers trembling slightly under his steady grasp. It feels grounding, she admitted. As though I am tethered to something stable. That's exactly it, Ethan said, his voice low and soothing. It's about being present with someone, sharing the moment without distractions. As they sat there, the silence between them grew heavy, not with discomfort, but with a kind of unspoken understanding. Leah found herself leaning into the sensation, allowing the warmth of his hand to spread through her. It was unlike anything she had experienced, and she found herself wanting more. What happens next? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. That depends on what you're ready for. Connection isn't something you rush. It's about building trust and taking it one step at a time. Leah nodded, her glowing eyes meeting his. I trust you, Ethan. Her simple declaration made his breath catch for a moment. Thank you, Leah, he said, his voice soft. That means a lot to me. He shifted slightly, their shoulders now almost touching. Leah's bioluminescent skin flickered faintly as she turned to face him. You said touch can communicate emotions. What emotions are you feeling now? Ethan hesitated, his gaze steady on hers. Curiosity, he admitted. And admiration. You're brave, Leah. You're willing to step into the unknown to understand something that's completely new to you. That's not easy. Leah's cheeks flushed faintly, the light in her skin growing warmer. You think I am brave? I do, Ethan said firmly. And I think you're beginning to understand more than you realize. Leah's heart swelled at his words, a strange but pleasant ache spreading through her chest. She reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing against his arm. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her, and she pulled back instinctively. Sorry, she murmured, her voice tinged with embarrassment. Ethan shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. You don't have to apologize. It's all part of learning. Encouraged by his reassurance, Leah reached out again, this time letting her hand rest lightly on his forearm. The texture of his skin was rougher than hers, warm and alive in a way that felt almost intoxicating. Her fingers traced the lines of his muscles, her movements slow and deliberate. It is fascinating, she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. Your kind is so different from mine, yet there is a beauty in the way you are. Ethan chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I could say the same about you, Leah. You're extraordinary. The intensity of his gaze made Leah's chest tighten, and for a moment, the logical part of her mind fell silent. She was no longer a researcher analyzing data. She was simply Leah, experiencing something new and profound with someone she trusted. As the stars outside the ship continued their endless dance, Leah realized that this was only the beginning of her journey. And for the first time in her life, she was eager to see where it would lead. The emotional divide. Leah's world was changing, and she didn't know how to stop it, nor was she sure she wanted to. The days since her conversation with Ethan had been filled with a newfound awareness of herself and her emotions. For a being who had spent her life adhering strictly to logic, the intensity of these feelings was both a revelation and a challenge. She found herself drawn to Ethan more than ever, seeking out his presence, his voice, and his touch. Yet, with every step closer to understanding human connection, she felt the weight of her own cultural conditioning pulling her back. Her species valued control above all else, and emotions were seen as chaotic and dangerous, a weakness to be eliminated. A rift in understanding. Leah and Ethan's growing bond did not go unnoticed. Her fellow researchers began to whisper about her behavior, their disapproval evident in the subtle flickers of their bioluminescent skin. On her homeworld, such intimate interactions with another species would be considered a betrayal of their principles. "You are distracted, Leah," one of her colleagues, Kale, remarked during a data review session. His glowing eyes bore into her, sharp with accusation. "Your work has become unfocused." Leah straightened, the flicker of her own skin dimming defensively. "I am conducting a thorough study of human behavior, Kale. My methods are sound." "Your methods," Kale said, his voice cold, "are clouded by your proximity to that human. It is dangerous to let their emotions infect you." The word struck Leah like a blow. She wanted to argue, but a small part of her wondered if he was right. Was she losing herself in the process of trying to understand? Later that evening, she found herself standing outside Ethan's quarters once again. This time, her hesitation was heavier. She carried the weight of her people's expectations and the doubts planted by her colleagues. Yet, when the door slid open and she saw Ethan's welcoming smile, her resolve strengthened. The bond deepens. "Hey, Leah," Ethan greeted, his voice warm. "You okay? You seem tense." She stepped inside, her movements slower than usual. "I am conflicted," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan frowned, concern flickering across his face. "What's wrong?" Leah hesitated, her luminous eyes meeting his. "My people do not approve of this," she said, gesturing vaguely between them. "They believe emotions are dangerous. That I am compromising my judgment by engaging with you." Ethan leaned against the wall, crossing his arms as he considered her words. "And what do you believe?" Her chest tightened. "I do not know. I feel things I cannot explain, things I have no words for. It is overwhelming." Ethan's expression softened, and he stepped closer, his presence grounding her. "Leah, you don't have to have all the answers right now. Emotions aren't something you figure out overnight. There's something you live through, bit by bit." She looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with uncertainty. "How do you live with such chaos inside you?" Ethan chuckled softly, the sound comforting. "We don't fight it, Leah. We embrace it. The chaos is what makes us human, it's what makes life worth living." Leah's gaze dropped to the floor, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of what this means for me. For us." Ethan reached out, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Fear is normal. But you don't have to face it alone. Trust me, Leah. I'm here for you." His touch sent a familiar warmth through her, calming the storm inside her mind. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean into that warmth, her body relaxing as she let out a shaky breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "A test of trust." Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's alarm, a sharp, piercing sound that sent adrenaline coursing through them both. Ethan's demeanor shifted instantly, his military training kicking in. "That's the emergency signal," he said, his voice steady despite the urgency. "We need to head to the command deck." Leah followed him without question, her own instincts taking over. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic. A rogue asteroid had been detected on a collision course with the ship, and the crew was scrambling to adjust their trajectory. "Leah, over here." Kale called, motioning her toward the navigational console. Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "Go. Do what you need to do. I'll be on standby." She nodded, grateful for his understanding, and hurried to Kale's side. The two of them worked together, recalibrating the ship's systems and rerouting power to the engines. The atmosphere was tense, every second ticking by like an eternity. A moment of unity. When the ship finally shifted course and the danger passed, a collective sigh of relief swept through the crew. Leah felt her tension drain away, but she couldn't stop herself from glancing toward Ethan. He caught her gaze from across the room, giving her a small nod of approval. Cale noticed the exchange and frowned. "You risk everything for that human," he said quietly. "Your objectivity. Your future." Leah's eyes narrowed, a flicker of defiance sparking within her. "My connection with Ethan does not make me weaker, Cale. If anything, it has made me stronger." Cale didn't reply, but his disapproving glare lingered as he walked away. Later, as the ship returned to its usual hum of activity, Leah found Ethan in the observation deck. The stars outside seemed brighter tonight, their light casting a gentle glow over his features. "You did good today," Ethan said as she approached. "Saved our necks, probably." Leah smiled faintly. "It was a team effort." He studied her for a moment before speaking again. "You stood your ground with your colleague. That couldn't have been easy." Leah hesitated before nodding. "It wasn't. But I am beginning to understand something, Ethan. Connection does not weaken us, it strengthens us." Ethan's smile widened, pride shining in his eyes. "That's the Leah I know." As they stood side by side, the stars continuing their eternal dance beyond the glass, Leah felt the divide within her beginning to close. For the first time, she saw a path forward, one where she could honor both her people's values and her own growing understanding of what it meant to connect. The experiment. Leah sat alone in her quarters, her mind spinning with everything that had transpired. The divide between her logical upbringing and the emotional world she was beginning to explore was growing harder to ignore. Her conversations with Ethan had awakened something within her, a curiosity that burned brighter than ever. Yet, the disapproval of her peers loomed over her like a shadow, reminding her of the risks she was taking. Despite the weight of their judgment, she couldn't let go of the experiences she was having with Ethan. The warmth of his touch, the depth of his words, and the comfort of his presence were unlike anything she had ever known. They defied logic and data, yet they felt undeniably real. She needed to understand them, not just as an observer but as a participant. Leah resolved to take the next step. She wanted to experience connection not as an abstract concept, but as something tangible and personal. For that, she would need Ethan's help. Summoning her courage, she left her quarters and made her way to his. When the door opened, Ethan greeted her with his usual easy smile. "Leah, good to see you. Everything all right?" She hesitated, her glowing eyes meeting his. "I need your assistance," she said, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. Ethan stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. "Of course. What's going on?" Leah entered and turned to face him, her hands clasped in front of her. "I wish to understand human connection more deeply. I want to experience it." Ethan's expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and seriousness crossing his features. "Leah, that's not something you should rush into. Are you sure you're ready for this?" She nodded, her resolve unwavering. "I trust you, Ethan. I need to know what this means." He studied her for a long moment before sighing softly. "All right. But we'll take it slow. This is about trust, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed." Leah felt a flicker of relief at his words. Ethan always seemed to know how to make her feel at ease, even when she was stepping into uncharted territory. He guided her to sit beside him on the couch, the soft fabric warm against her skin. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers. "May I?" "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. When his hand closed around hers, the now familiar warmth spread through her, grounding her in the moment. But this time, it didn't stop there. Ethan shifted closer, his other hand resting gently on her shoulder. Leah's heart raced, the glow of her skin intensifying as she felt the weight of his touch. "Connection is about more than just touch," Ethan said softly. It's about being present, sharing something real with someone you trust. Leah's gaze met his, her luminous eyes filled with curiosity and something deeper, something she couldn't yet name. How do humans convey this connection? Ethan hesitated for a moment before leaning forward slightly. One way is through a kiss. It's a way of showing care, affection, trust. Leah's breath caught, her glowing skin flickering faintly. A kiss. Show me. Ethan searched her face, his expression gentle. Only if you're absolutely sure. I am, Leah said, her voice firm despite the fluttering in her chest. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull back. When their lips met, Leah felt a rush of sensations that overwhelmed her senses. It was soft, warm, and electric all at once. Her glowing skin pulsed brighter, her heart pounding in her chest. The kiss was brief, but it left her breathless. When Ethan pulled back, he watched her carefully. Are you all right? Leah nodded, her glowing eyes wide with wonder. I did not expect it to feel like this. It is overwhelming, but not unpleasant. Ethan smiled, his hand still resting on hers. That's the point, Leah. It's about feeling, not just thinking. She sat in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. The logical part of her mind struggled to make sense of the experience, but her emotions told a different story. For the first time, she felt truly connected to someone, not as a researcher studying a subject, but as one being reaching out to another. I want to learn more, Leah said finally, her voice filled with quiet determination. Ethan chuckled softly. We've got time. There's no rush. We'll take it one step at a time. Leah felt a small smile tug at her lips, the tension in her chest easing. For the first time, she allowed herself to simply be in the moment, free from the weight of her people's expectations. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she wasn't facing it alone. Ethan would be there, guiding her as she explored this strange and beautiful new world of human connection. A new understanding. Leah's perspective had shifted irrevocably. The moments she shared with Ethan were unlike anything she had ever experienced, and they awakened a depth within her she hadn't known existed. Each interaction brought new revelations, and though her logical mind still wrestled with the unfamiliar emotions, she found herself craving the connection that only Ethan seemed able to provide. Their bond had deepened in ways Leah hadn't anticipated. What began as a study of human behavior had transformed into something far more personal. She found herself lingering in his presence, savoring the warmth of his smile and the comfort of his touch. Yet, amidst the wonder of discovery, doubts lingered in the recesses of her mind. Her species would not understand. They valued detachment, efficiency, and control, and anything outside those parameters was seen as a weakness. The whispers among her colleagues grew louder, their disapproval evident in every interaction. Leah knew she was walking a fine line, balancing the expectations of her people with the desires of her heart. One evening, as she sat in her quarters reviewing data, a message came through from Kale, her superior. The tone was cold and formal, a stark contrast to the warmth she had come to associate with Ethan. Leah, Kale began, his bioluminescent skin flickering faintly on the screen. Your recent behavior has raised concerns. Your proximity to the human is compromising your objectivity. I urge you to reconsider your actions before they jeopardize your standing. Leah stared at the message, her chest tightening. She understood the implications of Kale's words, but the thought of severing her bond with Ethan filled her with an ache she couldn't ignore. The choice before her was clear: comply with the expectations of her species or continue down this uncharted path with Ethan. That night, she sought him out. Ethan was in the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. The soft glow of the ship's interior lighting framed his figure, and Leah felt a wave of relief wash over her at the sight of him. He turned as she approached, his expression shifting to one of concern. Leah. What's wrong? She hesitated, her hands fidgeting as she struggled to find the right words. Kale has expressed his disapproval of our connection. He believes it is affecting my judgment. Ethan's jaw tightened, and he crossed his arms. And what do you think? Leah took a deep breath, her glowing eyes meeting his. I think, he may be right. But I also believe that what I am learning from you is valuable. It has given me a new perspective, one that I did not think was possible. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze steady and unwavering. Leah, you don't have to justify this to anyone. What we've shared, it's real. And if it's helping you see things differently, that's not a weakness. That's growth. His words resonated with her, and she felt a flicker of hope amidst her uncertainty. I do not wish to stop, she admitted. But I fear the consequences. Ethan reached out, his hand brushing lightly against her arm. Sometimes, doing what's right for you means taking a risk. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Leah nodded, her resolve solidifying. I will not let fear dictate my choices. I want to continue this journey, with you. Ethan smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. I'm with you, Leah. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Their moment was interrupted by an urgent alert from the ship's systems. A sudden energy surge had destabilized the core, and the crew was scrambling to address the situation. Leah and Ethan exchanged a glance before rushing to the command deck. The scene was chaos. Alarms blared, and the crew worked frantically to stabilize the core. Kale stood at the center of the activity, his expression grim as he barked orders. Leah immediately joined him, her logical mind taking over as she assessed the situation. Ethan worked alongside her, his military training proving invaluable in the crisis. Together, they coordinated efforts to reroute power and prevent a catastrophic failure. The tension was palpable, but Leah found comfort in Ethan's steady presence. Even amidst the chaos, their connection remained a source of strength. When the crisis was finally averted, a collective sigh of relief swept through the crew. Leah leaned against the console, her body trembling from the adrenaline. Ethan approached her, his expression a mix of exhaustion and pride. You were incredible, he said, his voice low but full of admiration. Leah managed a faint smile, her glowing skin dimming as she regained her composure. We were a team. Kale's voice cut through the moment, his tone sharp. Leah, a word. She followed him to a quieter area of the command deck, her heart sinking at the look on his face. Your actions were commendable, he said, his tone begrudging. But do not let this success blind you. Your connection with the human is a liability. It must end. Leah met his gaze, her own expression resolute. You are wrong, Kale. My connection with Ethan is not a liability, it is an asset. It has taught me to think beyond our rigid framework and to see the value in emotions and trust. I will not end it. Kale's expression darkened, but he said nothing more. As Leah returned to Ethan's side, she felt a newfound determination take root within her. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to face it. With Ethan by her side, she knew she could bridge the divide between their worlds and forge a path towards something greater. Bridging two worlds. The stars outside the ship shimmered like scattered diamonds, their endless dance a silent witness to Leah's transformation. She stood on the observation deck beside Ethan, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. Yet, within that weight was a newfound clarity, a certainty that what she was experiencing with Ethan was not just significant, it was revolutionary. Her people valued logic above all else, their culture built on the foundation of detachment and efficiency. But Leah had come to realize that emotion, trust, and connection were not weaknesses. They were strengths, forces that could unite, inspire, and drive individuals to achieve the extraordinary. And it was this realization that gave her the courage to speak out. Leah turned to Ethan, her glowing eyes meeting his. I need to address the council. They must understand what I have learned. Ethan studied her, his brow furrowing. Are you sure? They haven't exactly been supportive so far. I am sure, Leah said, her voice steady. If I do nothing, then I allow their misconceptions to persist. They need to see that there is value in what we share. Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. All right. I'll be there with you. Together, they made their way to the central chamber where the Council of Leah's species convened. The room was vast and sterile, its walls glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns that reflected the collective mood of those present. As Leah and Ethan entered, the murmurs of the gathered council members ceased, their luminous eyes narrowing with disapproval. Kale stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding as he addressed the assembly. Leah, he said, his tone cold. You have been called here to explain your actions. Your continued fraternization with the human has raised serious concerns. Leah stepped forward, her glowing skin flickering faintly. I am aware of your concerns, Kale. But I am here to challenge them. A ripple of surprise swept through the council, their glowing patterns shifting in response. Kale's expression darkened, but he allowed her to speak. Throughout my time with Ethan, I have come to understand something that our species has long overlooked, Leah began, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. We have always valued logic and detachment, believing them to be the key to progress. But we have ignored the power of connection, trust, and emotion. These are not weaknesses. They are strengths. Kale scoffed, his bioluminescence flaring. Emotions are chaotic and unpredictable. They compromise judgment and weaken resolve. You cannot seriously believe they are beneficial. I do, Leah said firmly. Because I have experienced them. Through my bond with Ethan, I have discovered a depth of understanding and resilience that I never thought possible. It is not chaos, it is unity. It is the drive to protect, to create, and to grow. Ethan stepped forward then, his presence commanding as he addressed the council. I understand your hesitation. My own people have struggled with the balance between logic and emotion. But it is through that struggle that we have found strength. Connection is what has allowed us to thrive, to overcome adversity, and to explore the stars. Leah has seen this, and I believe you can too. The room fell silent, the council members exchanging uncertain glances. Kale's bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically as he spoke. And what do you propose, Leah? That we abandon our principles for the sake of your experiment? No, Leah said, her voice calm but resolute. I propose that we expand our understanding. That we allow ourselves to explore the possibilities that connection offers. Imagine what we could achieve if we combined our logic with the strength of trust and emotion. Her words hung in the air, their weight undeniable. Slowly, one by one, the council members began to nod, their glowing patterns shifting to reflect contemplation. Kale's expression remained hard, but even he could not deny the truth in her words. After what felt like an eternity, the head of the council spoke. Leah, your actions have challenged the foundations of our culture. But they have also revealed an opportunity for growth. We will consider your proposal. Leah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew this was only the beginning. The path ahead would be long and difficult, but it was a path worth taking. As the council adjourned, Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. You were incredible, he said softly. Leah turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. I could not have done it without you. Together, they left the chamber, their bond stronger than ever. For Leah, this was more than just a personal journey, it was the start of a new chapter for her people. With Ethan by her side, she was ready to bridge the divide between their worlds and create a future built on understanding, trust, and connection. As they walked through the corridors of the ship, the stars outside continued their endless dance, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. And for the first time, Leah felt not just curious, but truly alive.